First, thank you for coming. My name's Pettitt, and I have just had the. It's been a bit of our involvement's been a bit accidental, but it's been a really nice because I got to link with an amazing group of volunteers who care about the wetland at the Cultural Centre. And I just want to start before we do an acknowledgement of the country, which we'll do in a second. Just want to start by acknowledging those volunteers. Who would just please put their hands up who helped pull together today? Put your hand up. Don't be shy. And just say thanks to these people because we did this really, really quickly. And it's been so nice to see this event got sold out and it was a waiting list because there was just so much interest and thanks to that group who just pulled it together and to an amazing panel and speakers who you'll hear from today. So what we're going to do is we're going to shortly have an acknowledgement of country followed by some short, fast talks around different aspects of the wetland and its history and its importance, and then a panel. And then what we'd like you all to do is come with us out to the wetland, where we'll do a bit of a walking tour of that. We're also, there's going to be some media coming, both Channel 9 and Channel 2, I understand, and maybe others. So if you really don't want to be filmed or photographed in the media, please just let us know. But there is a lot of media interest in this as well, which is a really good way of hopefully getting some change. So really warm welcome and nice to be here. Linda, can I invite you up to just give us acknowledgement of country, please?
Thank you, Brad. So, by way of acknowledgement of the country that we stand on, I'd like us to leap back to a time when it was a magnificent biodiverse wetland, with life so plentiful it's almost too hard to imagine. But we will, here and now, try to imagine that. So let's begin to imagine this pre-colonial time by looking down at the floor and imagining that instead of shoes, our feet are bare, and that they stand on spongy, swampy ground where reeds grow so vibrantly and high that they tower over us. If it helps to imagine the sights and sounds and textures of this fecund environment, feel free to close your eyes. Imagine being back in this pristine environment in the orange light of dawn. A gentle breeze wafts through the she-oak, and a cacophony of birds, frogs, and insects command attention. Imagine standing and listening as part of this complex web of life, and having this web guide how and when to play our role in support of the whole. Let's be here on this once upon a time land, without our shoes and without our Western analytical minds. Feel in to what it might be like for us as humans to be in deep connection with everything around us. The plants, the animals, the insects, the earth, wind, and waters. Consider how respectful and honouring this interrelationship is, and how this works to support our kin and culture. Humans being in harmony as one part of a much wider ecology. This is what the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation did for more than 60,000 years, holding sacred this magnificent wetland they called Yandalup. Across countless generations, Noongar clans performed rituals, songs and dances to ensure that the hinterlands and tributaries of the Derribble Yerrigan stayed an abundant source of nourishment for the human and the more than human world. To end our acknowledgement of country, let's now look at our hands, to hold with gratitude the wisdom of Noongar ways of knowing and being, and to envisage a time when these can again be central to the health and healing of these lands and the critters and creatures that live here including us. And perhaps today we might forge some ways and means of working together on a mission to revitalise wetlands here, there and everywhere.
Thank you, Linda. That's a really nice way of reflecting on the budget that we're on here, and I want to pay my respects to elders past and present here in Wajak, our country. So we have a really wonderful lineup of speakers today, and can I thank each of them for giving up their time, and thank you especially Sabrina for the work that you've done on this and your shout outs on ABC Radio, including this morning, which was really nice, because I think that's going to be key, because I think most people just don't know about the issue and aren't aware. And every time I explain it to somebody that the wetland's going, they look at me in shock and horror like, what do you mean? So please welcome Sabrina Hahn, gardening guru extraordinaire.
Thank you so much, Brad. Thank you, everyone that is here for coming. And you especially, beautiful, because we are hoping that we get to keep the wetlands until this little tacker is an adult. So the purpose of this is my role really is to spread awareness that this is a really special place. It has been built by the people of Perth and by the children of Perth. And when I had Mandy on air talking about, so many people didn't even know that the wetlands had been decided that they had to go. So this is one of the rarest constructed wetlands in the world. It is such a unique thing to be able to do this. It is representative of how we should be going forward in our urban designs. Everywhere in the world, the two greatest concerns, it doesn't matter where you go in the world, number one is loss of habitat, number two is all the species that are either becoming extinct or at a critical mass where we know they will become extinct in 10 years' time. So the thing about these wetlands is it actually gives us a taste of what biodiversity is like. It cools the city down. It gives a whole different aspect. It links the cultural heritage of Aboriginal people when all this was wetland and Noongar people roamed through here. It is a place where kids get to see nature. The pictures, and Mandy may have them, I'm not sure, of the kids releasing the tadpoles in the wetland. One of the grannies of one of those kids rang up and said, they'd gone to the museum, they'd gone to the art centre. The thing that little boy talked about the most was actually releasing tadpoles in the wetland. And she made sure that he went back every year to see the frogs that he had helped release into the wetlands. So it's really it's on so many different levels that we strive to save this wetland. And considering that it is an award-winning constructed wetland, I think it is truly disgraceful that they even contemplate removing it. And even more disgraceful that they're not even including a wetland in the new plan. So we really need to keep the momentum going on this, because it's on so many different levels, and it's vitally important that we start creating cities for other species that are not human. So we have to accept that the world is rapidly changing, that we are experiencing climate change. Something like this wetland is an oasis for biodiversity. We are lucky enough to live on land that has some of the greatest biodiversity in the world. We need to recognise it, we need to nourish it, and we need to bring it back into our urban environments. So, and I'm sitting here with some very wonderful and marvellous people who were at this journey right at the beginning. And it would be heartbreaking to actually see it removed for no apparent reason. If leakage is the point, it just needs to be maintained. You don't go to an old house and go, oh, the ceiling's cracked, let's rip the whole bloody house down. But that's the mentality of what's happening here. So I will make sure that we keep a media focus on what's happening and hope to God that someone will see the sense of maintaining and keeping this wetland. Thank you very much.
And thanks for your support on this, it's fantastic. Our next speaker is Mandy Bamford. Now, Mandy, I understand, has had a long journey with this project way back at the beginning. And I thought it would be really useful to step back and give some context and history as to why do we have such a wonderful wetland right in the heart of our cultural centre.
Thanks very much, Brad, and thank you, Sabrina. Yeah, very, very well chosen words there. We're really, really hoping we can get a rethink happening. So, who remembers what it was like before it was a wetland? Yeah, please come in, we've got some seats. Excellent. Okay, what was it like?
Hot.
Yep.
Bleak, bare, dull.
Yep.
The key question that someone should answer along the way is what, if any, role has the current atrociously bad management of the art gallery, which is a palace to its own dumbing down and abandonment of its responsibility as a state gallery, what, if any, role is it or has it or could it play in abandoning or defending that wetland, if it's where it is?
All right, maybe we'll park that one until the panel discussion. However, you're right, it was a lifeless fountain. It was a concrete box with a little fountain in the middle, and everybody walked past. Everyone just walked past and went and did their own thing. So Josh Byrne and Associates, who were a young gun group of landscape architects, got the job of reimagining it. They made a much lower energy, more sustainable, state-of-the-art, as Sabrina says, awarded wetland, using the filtrations all done by broken up, recycled building materials. So it was very, very well conceived and incredible for its time. It really was an inspirational project which has been recognised in awards and book chapters and all sorts of things around the world. And so what happened then was that people stopped. They stopped, they ate their lunch. If they had a lousy day at work, they would sit and stare at the wetland and be reinvigorated, watch the dragonflies, listen to the frogs. And this is the story we hear all the time. Now, just to flick back, I gather that this wetland, which is frighteningly similar to the one from 15 years ago, is actually being kept. Now, anyway, moving on. I know I'm talking to the audience that knows this. Now, Sabrina mentioned those amazing photos. I'm just going to duck down and quickly flick through these. You can find these on the web. But this is basically what happens when you put a beautiful play space in the middle of the city. One of the comments we've had from parents is that it's free. You know, it's a lovely free place to take your kids, and the one place they want to go is the wetland. Just, I love the hand on top.
Yeah.
So, when the wetland was constructed, once it was ready to receive animals, we ran a series of workshops and invited the public to co-create the space. This is one of the reasons why people love it, because they help to create it. So we talked about the invertebrates, and then the kids all came and they released the invertebrates. And then we talked about the fish, and then they released the fish, and then released the frogs. So we brought a whole generation of little children along with us. And this is a group, we had school groups who came down. This is a group of river rangers, and they're introducing some of the invertebrates into the wetland. So, of course, that gave us a chance to talk about that whole story of, you know, ecology and biodiversity. So, ticked lots of curriculum boxes, but also had that amazing emotional connection of these are my bugs, and this is just priceless. I don't know if you can see the little slender tree frog that's just here, but look at the face of that child. So these were the children who we asked to care. We asked for them to care about their little space. And I used to be down there doing things weeks after this happened, and these children would come back to look for their frog, to look for their yeah, absolutely, because they cared. Now, science communication theory will tell you that the way that you change minds and actions as far as biodiversity is to teach people to care. So what we're doing is raising a group of little kids and their parents who care and care about biodiversity. What is the message that this sends to those children, now young adults, if 12 years down the track we go, oh yeah, well we did care about that, but now we don't, we're ripping it out. And so it is personal for me, because this was a promise we made to those children. And look, we've had, unfortunately, we were going to have a couple of the kids here today, but they've got another thing on, but they would love to have spoken about how they go back to that place and how much it means to them. Okay, so just quickly, because I think I've used my 5 minutes. Beautiful children, these are on the web, you can find them. And I mean, it worked. It's a beautiful biodiverse space. And so it's City Farm, and Roseanne's sitting in the front row here, curated the space, and absolutely, it is a piece of living installation art. It is the sort of art installations that are done around the world, associated with world-class artists, and that is exactly the sort of thing that it is, and does require a little bit of maintenance and a little bit of care to tweak it, and City Farm, in fact, did that really, really well. They no longer manage the space, so...
Not for the last 4 years or so.
No, so there's some tidying and gentle management, like any garden, that needs doing to bring it back to its beauty. But the wildlife don't care. You know, the wildlife are there. So these are all taken at the wetland. Some of them are animals that have been released, and some found their own way. Things like little grassbirds. They're a rush species. What are they doing? But they found a little patch of the city. Buff-banded rail. Many of you will have seen the ducklings that breed there. We've got lizards, we've got frogs. So all sorts of stuff has found its way. Think back to the blue pond. One seagull. That was my count. So our school children then started testing the water. They analysed it. You know, once again, that care, but also that opportunity. These are city schools. Gives them an opportunity right in the middle of the city that they can walk there. And of course, there's the frogs. I couldn't finish without talking about the clicking frogs. Who hasn't heard the clicking frogs? Excellent. Well, see, we know which preaching to the converted. This is it, thumbnail sized. Extraordinary how you can walk past and hear the frogs. So they are a huge success story. They, you know, we introduced the original population and they've absolutely gone off and now have bred right throughout the wetland. This is taken at night a few months ago, and you've got people just sitting there around the wetland during the evening listening to the frogs. It's a beautiful space, and why would you not keep it? So just hopping back to that, that thought of the grandma and the little child. Here's the damselfly that possibly that little child released that's now emerged as an adult dragonfly. That was taken at the wetland, it's my finger, not a child's. But imagine that interaction of that little child and the power of that in that little child's mind. You could do anything in the city, but this is the thing that's going to stay with them, and this is what's going to give them that lovely, deep-seated calm. And all these wonderful speakers are going to tell you more about that. But thanks very much, Brad.
Thank you, Mandy. That was wonderful. Natasha Pauli is our next speaker who's a senior lecturer in Geography at the University of Western Australia, who is going to talk to us about some of the community and individual benefits of small biodiverse spaces.
Thank you so much, Brad. Yeah, tough act to follow, such a couple of fantastic and very passionate speakers. So I'll do my best to keep you engaged. So I have done quite a bit of research in the last few years around native verge gardens. Who here has a native verge garden? Okay, this is definitely above average for Perth. So not a surprise there. But around Perth, we see about 8%, 5 to 8% of people have these native verge gardens, and it's increasing. Now you might be wondering, what on earth do native verge gardens have to do with the urban wetland? But there's a couple of things that I think are quite interesting about these spaces that are really relevant. So the first is that these are individually quite small spaces, but collectively they do make a difference. And they are deliberate attempts to kind of reintroduce biodiversity, heal country, heal the soil, and reduce water use. This is an example of a verge garden transformation in Netherlands. Obviously quite a bit of work has gone into that, but I just wanted to highlight transforming it from this kind of couch grass and sort of fairly unloved area with quite a bit of attention, soil, plants and so on, and turning it into something quite biodiverse in the space of only 18 months. So when we care for these spaces, we can transform them quite quickly. The other thing that I think is really relevant is that verge gardens, like the urban wetland, are an example of places where it's a public space where private individuals have actually made quite a lot of effort to really restore these spaces. So it's a partnership between the public and between private individuals. And I love all the stories about how people were involved in actually releasing animals and so on into the urban wetland. So I just wanted to highlight that. So I had a fantastic master's student, a couple of years ago, who was really interested in why people might do verge gardening, which I think is also relevant to some of the concerns that we have around wetlands in public spaces, which are quite, it's gone one step ahead, which has gone, anyway. So we asked people what were some of the key benefits, to nominate their top 3 benefits for actually having a verge garden. The first one, 2/3 of people said, we really want to create habitat for wildlife, and we feel like we've done that. We expected that. The third most popular one was to save water, and we expected that as well. What we weren't necessarily expecting was that around 45% of people said that one of the top 3 benefits for verge gardening was simply, it makes me feel better. And I know that George is going to talk a little bit more about the mental health benefits and so on of urban biodiversity. But one of the reasons why, from our research, that we think contributes to this sense of it makes me feel better is that aspect of community connection. So our research has indicated that by being in these public spaces that you're helping to restore, there are added opportunities to connect with other people, there are added opportunities to connect with wildlife, and they can be really fantastic spaces of public education. Some of the verge gardeners around the place are deliberately adding lots of native biodiversity and signage to these places and advertising that we're saving water, we're enhancing biodiversity. And there are also fabulous groups such as valley verges who are really using these small biodiverse spaces as a way of connecting community. And there are having these wild places in these urban spaces allows us to do that. So wonderful group down at Valley Verges. Does anyone know the Valley Verges group? Brad, yes, of course. Fairly familiar with what they do. But it's around about introducing biodiversity into public spaces and having people actually contribute to those variables. I just wanted to highlight one more thing, totally different context, but we've actually had people from the US, from Arizona, which is obviously very arid, come and try and look at the way that the suburbs of Perth are introducing biodiversity into places and making it normalised. So we had a study tour. They came over and saw what things people were doing here, were very impressed. We also went to Arizona and had a look at what people were doing over there. Now, Tucson receives about 1/3 of the annual rainfall that Perth does, but they are making, most of that rainfall occurs in summer. So they really want to get the rainfall off the roads and basically channel it into creating little temporary wetlands and vegetation on the side of the road, using all sorts of very spiky plants that we cannot plant here, but they're native to Arizona, so it's totally fine. So this has been an initiative that was started by the community, and it's now actually been adopted by the Water Authority in Tucson. So they're using native plants to create these important biodiverse spaces on the roads, using food plants, and most importantly, using this as a space where people can connect to each other and also learn more about native biodiversity. Now, I know you probably can't see this tiny little tag here, but this is actually a tag from the University of Arizona Arboretum. So they're actually incorporating educational signs around the place that people can actually go along and find out, well, what is this species? Where does it grow? How is it used? And all different kinds of things like that. And having these wild places in public spaces is a fantastic opportunity to do just that and to really have an opportunity for people to connect to each other and to nature, which I think we can all agree, definitely talking to the converted here, is really important in the situation that we find ourselves in. So thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. That was great. Daniel Martin is our next speaker, who has done some amazing research in this space around green spaces and wetlands and green linkages. Also from the University of Western Australia. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. I just wanted to start out and thank you for that introduction around where we are in wetlands, because a number of years ago, 15 years ago, I was involved in reconstructing, using geological maps, a kind of vision of the wetland landscape of Perth. This is us here in the urban wetland, but we can kind of start to go back in time, and what emerges is saturated environment, you know, bits that are really wet, bits that are slightly less wet. We zoom out a little bit further and we see, yeah, we're in the middle of a completely different landscape. We're in the middle of a wetland city. And zooming out again to this environment, which many of you will know, but some of you may not, this wetland environment that Perth sits on. And so it was an interesting project because we can cite ourselves very small and then we can zoom out very, very large to the whole picture of Perth's, the coastal plain as a wetland plain. Perth CBD, Gallop, Lake Munga, Ngumboro, Herdsman Lake, all the way out to that wetland chain running all the way through to Careen, to the whole system across the whole city. So can we think about anything in Perth without thinking about wetlands and water? Probably not, and I think the future is going to teach us that we really do need to. One of the earliest photos of Perth, Clays Brook, so it looks very different today, obviously. 1851, Alfred Stone Hawes. But when I look at this image and then I look at this image, I think it's lost. We've lost a lot of wetlands. We've lost, some say 80%, others say more, but we've lost a lot of wetlands. But when I see a project like this, I see a rewilding, I see a recreation, and that to me is amazing optimism for the future, because it means that as designers, as landscape architects, as ecologists, we can actually do a lot better. We can create new wetlands, we can rewild. Rewilding, and you know, a lot of us are talking about rewilding, and it needs to get louder and stronger. Of course, this wetland is precious, it's wonderful, and I couldn't say it any better than Sabrina and Mandy, who've just spoken about all the connections and the optimism in this place. It's a beautiful, beautiful heart for our cultural centre, and the only piece of green for a very long time, the only sound of frogs for a very long way. I want to show this one because it's Melbourne, 1960s, from the NGV archive. This is their kind of cultural precinct, and typical of 1960s modernist urban design, there's a couple of rows of trees, but really it's a fairly natureless environment. Fast forward to just last year, a major, amazing rewilding project is being proposed for their cultural centre. Very similar in scale to our cultural centre, connects the Hamer Hall, connects the NGV, connects the spire of the arts precinct. Lark Wanda is the name of this project, and why is that going off? Landscape architects in consultation with ecologists, in consultation with many other people, creating an environment here which is completely rewilded. There's pathways, but there's a massive focus on mass planting, on smaller water areas, and really what is the endemic communities of Melbourne, wetlands and grasslands. These are examples of woody meadows that have sprung up around the site to create this really beautiful project. So I guess my provocation here is, we've got this word rewild. Okay, that's our current 700 metre Perth City wetland. What happens with this project if we take this huge site, this amazing site which connects the heart of Perth, and make it all a wetland? Think about rewilding for the purpose of this entire precinct and this entire site. And as they're demonstrating in Melbourne, it can be done here. It'll be done differently here, with local species, with a local connection, with local kids, with local people. But there's a real opportunity here, I think, for Perth to in the development of this precinct, to think about rewilding, to bring this to the heart of it. This is an interesting image because it's potentially, it's even more treeless than the 1960s vision of Melbourne. And the fountain's not quite visible, but we've come a long way, and we're we are going to, go further. And I think that's the yes. I mean, the art gallery is a wonderful brutalist building, don't get me wrong, but brutalist didn't do landscape very well. So that's the vision. Can we rewild? And I know we can, and this project proves we can. So yeah, let's keep going.
Thanks, Daniel. That is an excellent provocation. Thank you very much. And our last speaker is Dr. George Crisp, who is, I think we've had a lot of doctors speak today, but you're the only real doctor as a medical from Doctors for the Environment, who's done amazing work for a long time. Thank you, George.
Thanks, Brad. I think it's an argument who the real doctors are. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the health connection here, because we should really be seeing these green spaces and nature in our cities as vital health infrastructure. And we massively underestimate the value of nature everywhere, but particularly in our cities. And health is one of the reasons. But it's quite a good idea to start by thinking about where does our health actually come from? Because in the public discourse, when politicians talk about health and media talks about health, they often frame it in terms of our health service or other sort of parameters, that involve economics and things like that. Whereas in actual fact, I work in the healthcare service. I'm very proud of a lot of things we do, but it probably is a very small minority of what determines our health, actually. It's been estimated that somewhere between 10 to 20% of our health outcomes that we enjoy are related to healthcare. Most of it is actually related to what's happening around us in terms of the environment that we live in and the society that we live in. The air we breathe, clean air, clean water, nutritious food, shelter, education, a whole bunch of things that actually shape our health for our life. And of course, if you take a broader view of health, it becomes quite sort of obvious as to why nature is so important and how it affects those determinants of health.
George, put the microphone close.
Is that better? Sorry. We've actually known about the links between health and environment for a very long time. For hundreds of years, in fact, people have been looking at changing urban design to improve health. If we go back to before the Fire of London, John Evelyn, who was a founder member of the Royal Society, the world's oldest Royal Society, was proposing at the time to re-green inner London with more parks and trees to improve the health of Londoners, which was suffering. But now basically we have a lot more data, and modern science basically is able to tell us a lot more about those linkages. And if you look at the things that are associated with exposure to nature and our health, the list is very long. The top ones are in light blue, relate to children particularly, and we know recently that cognitive development and ADHD and a lot of the things that we're seeing are affected by our exposure to nature when we're young. Mental health impacts also are really important in this, and as you probably know, we're facing an epidemic of sort of mental ill health. It's something that we just can't cope with as doctors. It's growing and it's a real problem, and no one's really got a solution to it. But one of the things that's integral to this is our exposure to green spaces and nature. There are countless studies that I could sort of point to here, but one of the ones that I think has been really useful is this study that was done in Denmark, looking at 900,000 people and where they grew up in terms of their proximity to green space. This is urban environments, and what they found sort of across this, and this has been reproduced in other studies, is that when you're growing up, the closer you live to green space, independently of other factors like poverty or housing or all of those things, with genes, the better your long-term mental health outcomes are. The further away you are, the worse they get. And the difference is about incidence of an increase of 50%. I mean, it's a massive increase in terms of things, and that accounts for things from psychotic illnesses right the way through to eating disorders and personality disorders. There is a very, very strong link between them. So as we basically remove green spaces from our city, what we're actually doing is we're ensuring worse future mental health in our peoples. And conversely, the more we incorporate green spaces, nature in urban areas, it is an opportunity basically to address future mental health. In terms of what's the mechanism for this, because of course, we know that there are a number of factors, and we don't know necessarily how much each of these things are shaping our health, but what we do know is that green spaces, natural spaces, result in greater physical activity, there's a direct effect, there's a sort of biophilic effect, and there are some interesting studies where, like for example, people who are in hospital recovery after surgery have shorter residence times in hospital, or recover more quickly if they have a view of green space. So we know that there is a relationship between just being able to see trees and green spaces and our health. And it's been mentioned also, that sort of social inclusion or interaction is something that we know is really important for our health, both physical and mental, and it's encouraged by green spaces. And there's a sort of civic pride. I mean, we take people to places like King's Park, when we have visitors over from interstate or wherever, because basically there is something that it ingrains a positive sense in us, and of course that's all important for our mental health. And also we know that basically that these spaces are really important for modulating physical factors, heat. We know that the number of people that actually get hospitalised or die from exposure to high temperatures runs into the thousands in Australia each year. And we know that green spaces are really important at reducing that heat island effect that we get in our cities, improving air quality, reducing exposure to noise. All of these things are actually very important health determinants, and they're related to our green space. So rather than looking at this as sort of just green infrastructure in terms of trees and parks, this is actually really vital health infrastructure. And it's if we actually sort of captured the value of that in our economics, these spaces would be worth far more as green spaces than they would as concrete or built over. So we really have to save and promote these spaces as a way of avoiding really designing an intrinsically unhealthy mental landscape. Leave it there, thanks.
I think it's been an amazing selection of short, interesting, and really insightful talks. What we're going to do now is we are going to have 15 minutes of a quick panel discussion with our amazing panellists here. And then what we'd love to do is take you all out to the wetland and do some more talking and activities out there as well. But can I start by kicking this off with a question to the panel? So the redevelopment is about $55 million. So if everyone is not aware, there is a redevelopment plan for the Cultural Centre over space, about $55 million. If you had $55 million to spend on the redevelopment of this space, what would you make sure was included, and obviously, what would be your vision for that space? And it's a bit unfair in some ways, so we're going to go from one end to the other, and we can't repeat exactly what the other
Oh, yes.
Thanks, Brad. Well, of course, we would have a wetland. We would start by checking the engineering, so we did that well. What I would love to do is redirect the water that currently is pumped out from under our city into the river, redirect it up, filter it through our wetland, use that for any watering that's used around the space, do something really innovative. And I mean, I'm not an engineer, but I figured that would be a really nice thing to do. And then plant it up with local natives, and I like Daniel's idea.
Thanks. Well, I would actually sort of go back a step and say I would like to incorporate the values of the health impacts. So what we actually did with development is that rather than just looking at just the straight economics of how much it costs to build, etc., is actually sort of take the value of, well, what is this doing from the social perspective? What's the value to the people that live there, the people that visit, the people that, all those things. What's the value to, in terms of its health impacts more broadly on the population? And if you then factor in those numbers, I think you come out with a very different design than what you would if you just look at the...
I would like to see us increasing biodiversity in our urban spaces rather than what we're doing now, which is rapidly decreasing biodiversity. I would also like to see a space where children have access to nature more often so that they learn to appreciate it, they learn about biodiversity and ecology, they become proud of where they live, and then they become caretakers of the land.
It's hard to now say something original. I think slowing down. I think if you asked me to do the whole cultural centre and said we want it to be a wonderfully wild, world-class precinct, it's going to cost more than 55 million, to be honest. So 55 million needs to be directed perhaps to something slower and smaller, and then we need to think about this as a longer project, one that our kids are going to inherit, one that's going to be with us for a very long time.
One that evolves.
One that evolves.
Like nature.
Like nature.
Right, okay, all of the above. Fantastic ideas. I guess I'll put my education hat on for a second, and I think in addition to all of these things, it would be really wonderful to have this as a fantastic active learning space, to have ability for people of all ages, right from kindergarten and younger, all the way through to university students and older, have access to this space for education. So to include some targeted monitoring, baselines, and make sure we actually know what the impacts are, and we can learn from those things.
Now, we don't have time for a lot of questions from the audience, but I know there are one or two burning ones. I know you have one. If we can kind of keep it short and sharp, just noticing we haven't got much.
Okay, there are 6 major cultural institutions within this precinct, and they all have directors. I would suggest, first thing, well, why don't we organise a concerted public campaign inviting them to stand up, call for a complete rethinking of the redevelopment. This is also a cultural activity, this redevelopment. They're sitting in a shared cultural space. I find the seeming total absence, now to be fair, that may be a total lack of media interest, but total absence of any active involvement or thought about the space in which they have. They should all be standing up saying, this is outrageous. Why aren't they? We should be very publicly inviting those who manage all those institutions to step up. So if they do, it's great. If they don't, we can expose them.
And there's a question out of that then, how do we do that? So that's who want to respond to. Because I think there is a really interesting question, which is at the back of what you're saying, which is, I think one, lots of people just don't know. I think that's partly why we're here today, but also I'm not sure those directors are talking to each other necessarily. So how do we wake it up the opportunity for people who I'm sure love this space and want it to be amazing? Do you want to respond to that?
I will. It's called you put the call out, and I think that's a really good idea. So it starts with an idea, and then what you do is you approach, you find out who's who in this zoo here, and then you say in the media, we have invited blah 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 to come to the table and talk about the future of the area where they are all sitting. We've had no response from 1, from 2, from 3, but we have had response from someone else, and then that means they come on air and they do their spiel, and then all the others go, we said we would come, but we had meetings. So that's how you play the game there. That's pretty easy to do.
It's very useful.
Oh, nice. I could probably start the ball rolling.
Excellent. Now, do we have any other really burning questions? I'll jump on the back here. 2 more, and then we'll.
I'm conscious that there's a lot of talk about shortage of housing and needing to densify the city. The comment about including education in this whole area is above a car park. So it's all going to have to be the equivalent of rooftop or upper level parking. Is there a way that we can use this project to reassure people about densification in the city that it will still maintain or be possible for green spaces, and also for existing apartments to do more about adding to their native highways?
Okay. Everyone hear that from the front? Who'd like to go?
I think the question of density is really important, because where we have density, all the research suggests we need good green space. We need more green space. And Perth is increasing in density, and we've got a lot of density emerging around the city. Even just ECU and the amount of new accommodation facilities around the city. So we need to, have comprehensive nature spaces in our city. So things like the Perth Riverfront Master Plan, which is, contentious because of a number of reasons, also who who it was announced by, but it's a wonderful plan. It is a wonderful plan for the city. So, you know, these kinds of ideas are really important if Perth is going to densify, that we have really good nature spaces to go with that.
You want to respond to that?
Yeah, look, I absolutely agree that densification is important. We do not want to be bulldozing more banks and woodlands, and we need to think about that. If we are having more people, we need to be smarter about how we do it, but absolutely not by cutting our green spaces. And you just go to Europe and look how people live there. They've got smaller places and lovely patches of greenery. You know, it's not like it hasn't been done elsewhere. It's just that we are used to just being able to expand out forever, and we need to think about it. And yes, absolutely, this could be a pretty.
They're doing it in Melbourne and Sydney really well.
Yeah, well, look at Dan's example of Melbourne. Absolutely, yeah.
There is lots of amazing examples. Got us to one of my favourite around re-greening of urban centres. I was recently in the Netherlands, which literally the cities in the Netherlands are having a competition around who can rewild and de-pave the quickest. We were there in June, and Utrecht, which is a pretty small city, 400,000 people, was up to almost 1 million pavers they'd removed in 2024 alone, and they were competing with other cities around. The cities were amazing. It was actually a sense of greenery and wildlife coming, and wetlands coming back into the city. It can be done, so which is pretty exciting.
Hi, I just want to thank you all for doing what you do today. It's absolutely fantastic what a small group of people have been able to do. And I want to talk about people power. And my question is really, what can we do to make change for this wetland and for other wetlands around Perth to make sure that they are maintained, and what would you like politicians to do? And a little plug is that at 10 a.m. next Friday we will be outside the Minister for Environment's office calling for stronger nature laws.
Thanks, Patty. I appreciate the work that you do as well.
I think we have the poorest environmental protection laws in the world, and it's getting worse rather than better. So what can we do? We just have to keep the whole thing about what we are doing in Western Australia and how we need to do it better. Politically, I'm probably, like a lot of other people, quite sceptical. I think the greatest things happen through people power, and we have to start the process, and then 20 years later, a politician will go, that was a great incentive that we had back then. You can all plant more trees in your garden. You can guerrilla garden, which I've done quite effectively around the town of Willagee, and go up and down your street and encourage people to plant trees or put verge gardens in, and just keep the pressure up on anyone that has any influence to maintain this wetland. If we can't save this wetland, then I fear for what's coming next.
You want to answer that?
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a great question. There's lots of really positive ways to engage as well. There are lots of friends groups that are around different wetlands and different bushlands. A lot of those groups have historically struggled to keep membership up because it is really demanding. So if there's a piece of bushland or wetland near you that you really love, find out about the friends group or start a friends group. And these groups can have a lot of influence. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with places like Kundula Regional Bushland, which is an amazing biodiversity asset in the middle of our suburbs, and that was once slated for housing. But the power of friends groups, like I think it was in the 70s, saved that area of bushland. So there are definitely lots of positive stories to keep the energy up. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you. And one last question.
Surely we need to promote the getting children and the community in touch with the bushland areas that we have got, all the bush river sites, the local bushland areas, and getting children in touch with nature under the age of 10 is really important, and that stays with them all their life. Dr. Richard Lou's book, Last Child in the Woods, is a lovely text about how important in terms
jump my question for you to finish up on.
Well, I mean, I agree. I'm not quite sure how we do it. I mean, I suppose it's something that we need to talk about, something we need to advocate about, and of course we can all vote about it too. It's a tragedy, isn't it? I mean, I've watched our school go from having a playground and trees to now being completely built out, and the local kids now have to go to the local park, which is shared with the community for green space. You know, it's all being sort of it seems like one-way traffic, and we just have to reverse that for our health. Exactly how that comes about, I'm not sure of the mechanism, but it's something we have to fight for.
I see lots of questions emerging. Now, I am not going to. That was the last question for a reason, just because we have people waiting for us outside, and we can continue the conversation certainly out there. Sabrina, can I just hand back to you just to, anyways, a bit of where to from here would be really useful. Thank you.
So where to from here? To the wetland. But where to from here? We all need to become part of this global network to try and save our environment. We need to not only do that for us, but we need to be aware that we share this planet with many, many, many other species. And we know that contact with nature is not just good for our mental health and our children's mental health, but it's good for us physically. As Homo sapiens, we are hardwired to nature. We are still hardwired to nature. And if we continue to destroy it at the rate we are destroying it now, then we will develop into a different human species, one that doesn't share the space with other species. We need to remember we are just another species on this planet, and we're intelligent enough to be caretakers for all the other species on this planet. So let's all get to it.
So we would love you, there's no rush out of this room, we've got booked for a little while yet, but so please eat some food and have a drink on the way out. We'd love you to join us at the wetland. Mandy, you're going to take us, do you want to tell us what you're going to do?
Some of you may have had the pleasure of punching out some little green frogs. These are mulch, so they're completely compostable. But we're doing a bit of an installation art piece. So when you go across to the wetland, you can hide your little frog somewhere around the wetland or your punched out leaf. It will become mulch. But the children and the people wandering past over coming weeks will find these weird little patches of leaf and maybe take pause to wonder what this is all about. So it's a little bit of installation art. Thanks, Brad.
So please join us for that. We're also going to do a bit of a rubbish pick up and all those kinds of things. There will also be some media out there who may want to talk to any of you who volunteer.
Just an ad for our group. We're a very small group, really small. People are really busy, people like Mandy that travel and educate people. If you want to join us to really help, if you really want to do something about it, we haven't got long. There's an election coming up.
Yeah.
So there's only Linda, Ian, Aisha, myself, and Mandy really at the moment. That's very small. We're very lucky and fortunate that Brad came on board. If you really want to help, we have to do it now. I know we have to look after our bushlands and everything, but this little patch needs it now, because as soon as we get quiet, they know they can bring the fences in and do something, and they can do it just like that.
Yes,
So
we know.
So join us. There's Aisha there, there's Linda and Ian, Mandy and myself. Talk to any one of us and give us your name and, be with us.
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you. So please come out to the wetland, join us out there. Tim, anything else? That's all? Yep. And we'll have a little guided tour and an activity out there now. So thank you again for joining us today. We greatly appreciate it.